test call? So she should be calling in right now. When we do that, you want me to have her say some steps so that you can do the test?
Yeah, once she's on, I'm just going to start cranking up the volume on her.
Yeah, you still have 2 minutes to get it. Perfect.
Yeah, no, actually, it's 7:06.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
That clock is wrong. It is 7:06. It's 100% my fault. And I'm
Perfect. It's not my fault she's late.
How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Doing well.
Hello, Mr. Mohawk.
need to be like,
I forgot about the
Having Carol calling right now.
Monday at 5. Ryan.
Perfect. You got it.
Oh, okay.
Awesome.
I'm on that committee.
Yeah. Yes, you are.
Hello.
Your name came up wrong in all of our meetings. So.
Hello.
All right. We hear you loud and clear.
That's not a good thing.
Sounds good.
Just for curiosity, my problem in the past has always been down where Matt usually sits. That's where I usually can't hear. Can somebody from down that end try talking and see if I can hear them?
You know what? You have the person in the flesh, Matt, going to try it out.
Oh. Testing. 1, 2, 3. Carol, can you hear me?
Yep, I hear you fine, so maybe we've solved the problem.
Very good. Thank you.
Now turn it on.
Thanks, Carol.
All right.
Carol, I missed you. It's Ellen.
Those 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Yes, so you wanted to hop off, right?
yes.
You want to hop off the call, right? So Carol, they're gonna have you hop off, and if you want, I can text you to hop back on, or give you a call.
Yeah, don't try and the number you're talking to me on doesn't get text, so you can either call me on that or you can text me on my cell phone.
Okay, so just keep it on. Okay, never mind, Carol. Do you mind just staying on? Chuck said stay on.
Okay.
All right, great. Thank you.
All right, we're going to call the district budget meeting to order. December 20th, 2022. What, say what? January? December? Oh, yeah. My, how time flies. All right, so with rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, now we have a remote member participating this evening, and we have her on the phone now. Carol?
Yeah,
Where are you?
in Satellite Beach, Florida.
Are you alone?
My husband is in the other end of the house.
That's a good place for him. All right. We'd like to take care of the minutes from our last meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes? Shane has moved, seconded by Scott. Does anybody have any additions, deletions, reflections, comments, or other participatory needs for the minutes? Seeing none, we have to pass everything by a roll call vote because Carol is a distance participant. So Pat, would you please start the roll call?
Mrs. Lang,
Yes.
Ellen,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Shane,
Yes.
Lee,
I'll abstain. I was not present.
thank you. Gillian,
Abstain?
Gina,
Yes.
Mackenzie,
I'll also abstain.
Chuck,
Yes.
and Naomi is excused. And who did I miss?
Dan?
Dan, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Dan, thank you. Okay. They are approved. 1, 2, 6, 7, 0, 3.
Thank you very much, Pat. Despite the fact that it is not actually on our agenda, my goal is to increase participation in district budget meetings. And so not only do we have public participation at the end of the meeting, but at this time I'm going to ask if anybody from the public would like to ask us a question or make some comment. It leads me to believe I should be as silent as all of you. All right. Department budget reviews. We're going to have the elementary schools, the upper elementary school, the middle school, and the high school. So I assume we will take them in that order. I apologize that my distance vision is not that great, and I can't actually identify any of you at this distance. So if the elementary schools would come forward where I can see. And Michelle, are you the ringleader tonight?
Good evening. I'm actually our ringleader this year. So good evening, and thank you for inviting us to provide you with an overview of the proposed 2022-23 school budgets for Mastercola Elementary School, Thornton's Ferry School, and Reed's Ferry School. I am Michelle Romaine, principal of Mastercola, and here with me this evening are Assistant Principal at MES, Alicia Hanson-Prue, Principal of Thornton's Ferry, Julie DeLuca, Assistant Principal at TFS, Michaela Champlin, Principal at Reed's Ferry, Bonnie Pancho, and Assistant Principal at Reed's Ferry, Laura Libby. The three elementary schools collaborated extensively to ensure that our budgets meet the needs of our students, provide students with an equally strong education across all three schools, while maintaining each school's unique culture and a budget that is fiscally responsible. We are confident that these proposed budgets provide our students and staff with all they need to excel. The elementary administrators met with our budget liaisons on Friday of last week, so I will turn to Gillian Savage to share any information or insights with you. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to examine our budgets, and we would welcome any questions you have. Thank you.
Gillian? There we are.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. So Yes, last week, myself, Gina, and Shane went over to Thornton's Ferry, and we met with the principals and, I'm so sorry, the assistant principal, I'm sorry. Hey. Okay. So overall, just as Michelle said, it is a level-funded budget from last year. Some very small increases would be attributed to general cost of increase in gas prices for field trips. Contract agreements have gone up slightly, and some things like, consumables like paper. We did catch, Gina caught, on Thornton's Ferry on page 6. There is a typo. At the bottom of the page, it's in math supplies. It's listed as proposed of $4,406. That actually is just, it's a typo, so it's actually supposed to be $2,406, again, leveled with prior year. So that was a good catch. There were two notable things that we kind of talked about, and that was the addition of $7,000 per school and that includes faculty and, faculty salaries and supplies. And that's to implement a co-curricular activities program for the students across all 3 schools. So that would be $7,000 per school. So we discussed this at length, and it's really what it is it's an expansion of some of the after-school programs that they already have. And this would help to include things like student-driven. What are the students' interests? To help them implement things that the students are interested in doing outside of the actual curriculum that they do every day, math and science. It would supply teachers, it would supply the supplies, it would really be able to also implement things like additional academic support for students. It would be a really good way for social and emotional growth for students, especially with COVID. A lot of the kids might not have the interaction that they normally would outside of their classrooms or pods. This allows students across the school to meet who may not be able to interact. There was some mention of potential for before-school activities as well. Let's see. And the other thing that we talked about that was noticeable increase was the addition of funding for ADA and wheelchair-compliant furniture. We were able to tour Thornton's Ferry to really see what some of this furniture entails, and not only is some of it's very specific and adaptable for students with mobility and different learning needs, but also it fits the universal design for learning. So that means that it offers this flexible floor layout, classroom layout for each classroom. The tables are movable, they can be arranged differently, they can be moved to different heights to accommodate students. So in addition to being ADA and wheelchair compliant, they really are adaptable to all students' learning needs and abilities. They're very durable too. We took a look around and we kind of looked at some of the older furniture that was from the first wave. It's 4 or 5 years old, and when you look at it, considering it gets used every day by dozens and dozens of little students and hands, it is remarkably durable. It is remarkably, stain resistant. It was in great shape. So, quality furniture that will last a long time. Okay, thank you.
Questions from the committee? Well, I'll start the ball rolling with a couple of questions. Unfortunately, we don't have a school board representative here this evening. But I was given to understand that one of the members of the school board was reluctant to commit to the after-school program funding because there wasn't an articulated plan of how that money would be spent. So I would simply like to hear some explanation or defense of the proposed after-school programs in regard to that funding.
one of the things that we are really committed to with this co-curricular activities is that it is student-driven. And so we want to look at the interests of students. So that's one of the reasons why we haven't solidified an exact plan. We would like it to be open enough so that we could have a variety of different types of sessions, lengths of sessions, programming. So that at this point is why hasn't been solidified to the degree that we would be ready to implement it tomorrow.
Brian.
So understanding that it's intended to be student-driven, are there outcomes that are planned or objectives for the program?
Yeah, so we started, one of the things, I can share a little bit of the context. One of the things that we've heard a number of times from parents is that at the elementary school level, we are very limited in what we can offer for extracurricular activities. We do have the after-school program run by the National Adult Learning Center. We do have programs at times such as Girls on the Run, Lego Robotics Club, but they're inconsistently provided for families depending on staffing, volunteers, each year. So one of the outcomes is to provide sustainable extracurricular activities across the 3 buildings. The other is to provide students with opportunities that they wouldn't have in a typical day. So not only are we interested in what the students have to offer, but also the students. So for example, one of our objectives in bringing new experiences to kids may be that we discover there's a number of students who are really interested in cooking or baking or something like that. So then there would be a short-term, few-week after-school activities that would be led by an educator, and students could then sign up to do that. So those are really our objectives, is to be able to provide consistent, well-designed programming, as well as provide students opportunities they would not get within their school day.
Thank you, Michelle. That's reassuring. Lee?
So would there be an additional student fee for using these after-school programs?
That's a great question. There will not be any fee for students at this point for most of the programs. I'm hesitant to say never. Things like robotics cost a certain amount of money, and we've been able to use grant money. So I wouldn't want to say never, but one of our main goals is that there is no fee for families.
Any other questions? Brian?
So I guess in terms of the question about outcomes or planned outcomes, if one of the school board members' objection was not feeling there was a clearly defined plan, I wonder, particularly because in terms of the overall budget, this is not a huge line item relative to the overall budget. So I wonder if it would address the board members' concerns if there were articulated and measurable outcomes that were being targeted through those funds, so that at the end of a year, before the funds are being renewed at the end of, or in the next budget cycle, at the end of the year, there can be, I guess, kind of a pass-fail score of did we or didn't we meet the objectives that we agreed upon according to some reasonably objective measure.
Thank you for the feedback. Thank you.
I think with any prototype initiative, there's always a little bit of discovery in it as well. So I think that's good that we could both discover, explore, and arrive at some consistent assessment that could be fairly evaluated. Any other questions? Yes, Brian?
I have one more question. How many students is this designed to serve or expected to serve between the 3 schools?
So I think it will depend on the interest, but our goal would always be to include as many students as possible while keeping it safe and viable.
Michelle, what is your actual rise in student population for this past year and what's projected for the next year?
I would have to go back and look. I don't know if Matt Chavanel would be able to answer that at this point. Actually, I do have it for you. Oh, thank you. Let's see. Yikes. So this is current. So do you ask from last year to this year? Is that what? Do you have? That's what I have. 22, 23. You have it. Okay. Thank you. So at MES, our enrollment for 21-22 was 426 students, kindergarten through 4th grade. So that does not include preschool. And then our projected number is 442 for next year. Do you want the other buildings as well?
Well, I'm just curious because many people in the community feel that with all of the growth and development that we may be facing an increase in school population that would be difficult for us. And I don't think that's the case myself, but was looking for the actual numbers that the people at home who are viewing the Budget Committee considerations could understand the actual impact of growth and development versus the mythical perception.
I can share overall, there is a projected increase of 41 students across all 3 elementary schools, K-4, for next year.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Shane?
Just a comment and a little perspective. This was my first meeting. We went to Thornton's Ferry School, sat in a small conference room, and we were talking about some of the supplies and what the principals would like to do. And you know, they had this brand new stand-up desk right there, you know, that the principal bought herself, right? And then you know, we're going down the halls, and there's some leaks and everything else. And I'm like, guys, why aren't you putting this on the budget? You know, this is my first one. I'm not understanding why there's no reach items. You know, the lunch tables are falling apart. They're like, you know, we really just try and keep it to the bare minimum for what we need to do for that year. So we're talking about, you know, between the 3 schools, $21,000. It's about $14 a student that they're asking for to get this project rolling. And the reason they're doing it is because they got their boots on the ground and they know what the students want, they know what they're looking for, and, you know, the ask is very small. I was at the school board meeting when somebody had mentioned that, and they said, you know, maybe we use the budget to get it going, and then maybe volunteers come in a little bit more next year. But to get this thing off the ground, I mean, for $14 a student, I think it's a no-brainer. You know, just as a thank you.
Well, I've been around town an awfully long time, and I will tell you I have always objected to parent-teacher organizations having to raise money and fund things that rightly belong in an operating budget because it's the responsibility of the school district. And I know that teachers are powerful and inventive people, and I know that they give of themselves. So it doesn't surprise me when you hear that a teacher spends money on a desk or other supplies and so forth that they're not looking for reimbursement for. On the other hand, I have to say Shane's absolutely right. These are things that rightly belong in the responsibility of the school district. And so I would like to say that myself as a member of the Budget Committee, I don't want our employees unnecessarily spending their own money when it is the responsibility of the community to provide many of these things. And if we don't say something like that once in a while, then nothing happens. So thank you, Shane. Any other questions? Yes, Scott.
I'd like to ask a couple questions about the furniture, if you don't mind. The very first question I have is, this budget was developed several months ago, and obviously on a daily basis, things are increasing in price. Do we feel, and this could be a question more for Matt than you guys, but do we feel that there's enough here now to purchase what is necessary based upon the time that it's taken? Do you follow the question?
I'm going to turn this over to Julie to answer, but yes.
Thank you for that great question. And the reason why Michelle turned it over to me is just this past summer, we purchased furniture. And so, as you know, in the furniture line item, we leveled it out for the 3 schools and kept that furniture line item the same. Again, just trying to be fiscally prudent. And the biggest impact, we had a slight increase last year. The biggest impact, though, was the supply chain. It was the delivery time. So that was more of a concern. The vendors, and again, if we're a situation, here's the money, and we can't buy it all this year, then we will put it in for next year. It's just like furnishing your house. You probably don't furnish it all at once, but you do it in stages. And so we already reached out to the vendor and asked them to give us quotes. So I don't know the pricing as of yet. I would imagine there'll be an incremental increase. But frankly, I'm more concerned about getting the materials at this point than the minor increase.
Sure, that's a very, very valid concern. Based upon what you have in the budget, if let's say cost did increase 25% and you weren't able to get as much as you wanted to get, is that going to impact a student? Particularly on the ADA?
No, it will not, because we always, it's amazing, and I think I'm going to speak to the budget members to actually speak to this more. We really leverage what we have and do creative things with it. So we take some desks that we have and we make them stand-up desks through the wonderful work of maintenance. So it will not directly impact a student. We also have a student services budget. So if there is a particular student need that we have that pertains to their specific needs, then that would be something we would ask Heather Barker, who's under student services, to provide. So no student goes without. What we're talking about, though, in terms of universal design for learning, we're looking to design spaces that are good for all kids, but specifically kids with mobility concerns. And then we have Heather Barker when it comes to very particular needs of kids.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
I told you teachers were inventive. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I thank you very much for coming before us this evening, and we wish you well.
Thank you for having us.
So next we have Marcia and Nikki from the upper elementary school. And I'm going to save you just a little bit of time by turning to my fellow member here, Dan, and ask him to tell us all about the liaison team's meeting with the upper elementary school. Well, it was an honor to work with you. Excuse me, Dan. Could you get the microphone a little closer to you?
No.
Thank you.
It was an honor to work with you, and it was enlightening and informing.
We had Marsha McGill, Dr. Rowe, myself, Jillian, Gina, and Chuck were all in this meeting. And it opened with Miss McGill and Dr. Rowe giving an overview of the budget. There was a focus on the co-curricular lines, which were new, but included academic support as well as activities like sports, running club, field hockey, poetry club, art club, cribbage, backgammon, and included both before school as well as after school activities. It was pointed out that the activities came mostly from kids' interests, but also from teacher volunteers. The purchase of sound equipment for recording band and chorus performances was included. The replacement of an alto sax for band, which we remarked at, we couldn't believe that you could get it at that price. The purchase of text and instructional materials at a variety of reading levels with resources to reinforce writing across the curriculum, the replacement of tables in the cafeteria and science room stools. We then get into the budget, and we really went almost line by line. Much of the initial discussion revolved around COVID and the lack of funding in 2021. For example, social studies field trips, Project Safeguard, gifted and talented, and professional meetings. There was a question and brief explanation of Project Safeguard, which started in the 80s but included goal setting, student-parent workshops, and included the local police. There was this discussion of 3-year averaging and how the 3-year average could be greater than the previous years. We were told that was a math question. We suggested that maybe we just remove the 3-year average notation. There was a question on postage and whether email might be an alternative to save cost. It was explained that indeed email is utilized, but much of the cost is mailing records and summer mailings. There was a question on printing and whether some of the costs could be deferred by in-house printing. There is no in-house printing at this time. There was a comment on police charges, and we won't go any further than that. There was a question about the lower proposal in the English language art supplies. It was explained that the population was down. There was an explanation, a brief explanation of the community relations line item. There was a request that we purchase instructional texts and resources materials that we always negotiate and understand that if we purchase a classroom set of texts, the teaching materials should be provided gratis. We are assured that this was taking place, including negotiations with outside vendors such as Home Depot. There was an inquiry as to whether there would be any savings in accelerating the final year, especially related to the science room chairs. We were told that's a Matt question. Hope you're taking notes. We asked if teachers were the #1 tool in the classroom, what's the #2 tool, and had we budgeted for it? The answer was support personnel and technology on a one-to-one basis. We asked about the school ranking from numerous sources. It was pointed out that the criteria varied by the ranker, with some being almost entirely subjective from unverified sources. Another criteria seemed to be diversity. Neither Ms. McGill nor Dr. Rowe gave much credibility on these rankings. Nor do I. There was a recognition that test scores are not where we would like them to be. There was a question on safety and the seemingly lack of budget for it. Dr. Rowe explained that it was budgeted at the district level. She explained that there's a crisis management committee that she's a member of and that they meet to train both teachers and students, that they have emergency packs that they check regularly and recently added playing cards to them. One of the criteria was a single entrance, which is locked. The committee meets regularly on best next steps. There was a question on air quality, and it was indicated that it's tested regularly and there are units in the classroom. When it was asked if it was up to par, the answer was yes. There was a question on traffic control, and it was indicated that it's an ongoing issue which is still being worked on. They work to unload 7 to 8 cars at a time. They utilize the police when needed, and they utilize the church parking lot. A question on capital improvements yielded that there were new floors, new bleachers, moved the office up front, library was redone, and the APR. A question on staffing indicated that all teaching positions were filled. A follow-up on professional development indicated that there were issues with getting sufficient number of subs, that initiatives need training, which is a district responsibility. There needs to be a consistent funding for outcomes. There are 2 early release dates, but it needs to be paid for to make it happen. There was a question on service center learning. It was indicated it was in the contract, and there was a committee of peers. Academic support was addressed, noting that it needed preparation, it addressed recidivism, and there are programs during the day that work both on intervention and extension. A question on 504 indicated that it's managed by guidance and counselors and also managed by the classroom teacher, but there may be a break between the classroom and guidance. There are yearly meetings with parents. There's professional development. There are different gaps. There's a question of scope and sequence, specifically how and why. What is good for one is not necessarily good for all. Access resources, not skills. It's a mindset, universal design. Class visits take notes. Students setting their own goals and posting on sticky notes, and there's still COVID issues. A final question on what have we missed was met with silence. I'd appreciate your input on anything I might have missed or omitted.
First of all, thank you for having us this evening. I'm Marcia McGill, and this is Dr. Nicole Rowe. Mr. Coakley, you did a wonderful job, so thank you very much. We continue to purchase the supplies and resources that are necessary to support, first of all, the goals of the district, the goals of the school board, as well as to meet the needs of all students and to meet our curriculum. So I think Mr. Coakley shared a little bit about our priorities this year are around the co-curricular activities, around furniture, an alto sax. We're talking about some equipment for music to record performances for parents who can't be there, as well as our reading and math resources and supplies. So I think you did a very good job. So with that said, are there some other questions we can answer? Unless, Nikki, you have some things you'd like to address.
Do either of my colleagues have a question? Gina?
I don't have a question, but I feel that your budget, just like the elementary budget, was very succinct. Every question was answered. I think the co-curricular activities are a wonderful idea, especially when you have the 3 elementary schools coming together. So it's really a good chance for students to get to know one another, and especially with COVID, they're not able to mingle like they normally would. So I'm in full support of that, and it was an enjoyable session. Thank you for having us.
Jillian?
No, I agree with Gina. It was a wonderful meeting, and I feel like this budget is very reasonable. I have 3 children that play musical instruments, and I can tell you that when I saw the cost of the alto sax, I did a double take because I couldn't believe that Ms. Serenita found something so incredibly reasonably priced. That said, I have a student who attends the upper elementary, and when we talked about the co-curricular lines, I don't know if my fellow committee members know, but the way that the day is structured, the classrooms are in pods. So even children in the same grade, if you're not within your pod, don't always have an opportunity to see each other throughout the day. So you really are, the students really are almost, they're restricted essentially to seeing the same 3 classrooms. And the addition of co-curricular, even what they have existing, exemplifies that these programs allow these students who go to the same school, who would not naturally meet each other, to meet each other. So it really is, our district is not so large that we would think that students in 6th grade don't know one another. So these provide opportunities not just for outside learning, but also to meet and develop a community and create a larger community of students.
Any other questions, comments, reflections? Scott?
Thank you, Chuck. A couple of quick questions. It's actually one question on several of the lines. So English language arts supplies, yes, page 6. Page 7 is math supplies, and then page 11, social studies text and reading text. All are, in my mind, kind of significantly lower on a percentage basis than they were budgeted for this current year. Why?
Our enrollment is projected to go down next year.
Okay.
We currently have 518 students, and next year we're expecting in the high fours, somewhere about 475, 480.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Any other questions from the committee? Marcia, I enjoyed the interview very much, and once again, one of the most important things you do is establish confidence in the way you manage and present on behalf of the upper elementary school. You made it a very thorough and pleasant experience. I thank both of you very much.
Thank you.
Carol, do you have any questions?
No, I'm all set.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening.
Now, I have to apologize to the committee and to the people who are here and the people at home. I'm a little bit remiss. Yes, we have an agenda with things we have to cover, but I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our new IT director for the school district, Jason Pelletier, who is sitting to the left of me. He is our new Nancy Rose, and I guess he's getting used to being called Nancy Rose. I had the good fortune some years ago of working in the same district that Jason was the IT director in, and I can testify to his competence and his dedication to what he does. So I'm very pleased to see him on board in Merrimack. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here. Appreciate it.
Okay. I'd like to hear from the middle school.
We should probably clap for Adam.
Thank you very much for having me here this evening. My name's Adam Carragher. I'm the principal at the middle school. So I'm going to look over towards, I think, Ellen, who is going to provide a little background of our meeting from this Monday evening.
I'm feeling a little peer pressure because Mr. Coakley had 2 typed pages, and I have like this giant page and just a couple of lines. But
Ellen, microphone, please.
oh, can you not hear me? I did have it on. Sorry. Oh, good. Thanks. I said I felt a little peer pressure because Mr. Coakley had 2 typed pages, and I have this big sheet of paper, but only a couple of lines. Oh, good. Chili, make me feel a little better. So we did have a meeting via Zoom. We didn't go into the school, but we were all able to meet Monday evening. We did review the budget. It was Shane, McKinsey, and myself. I have a little bit more of an in because the middle school is near and dear to my heart. I'm the PTG president there, and I don't even have a kid that goes to school there. It's a true story. I do happen to love the middle school. I think it's one of the best administratively run schools in the district after all of my children have been in several schools. And that's why I have decided to stay until my last one goes through the school. I told them I would commit to helping them and being involved in with the school until that time. So with that said, their budget is pretty much level funded, except for on page 1, they have asked for an additional $6,000 in academic assist programs, which Adam can expand on here in just a little bit. On page 10, they have asked for a little bit of an increase of $27.50 for co-curricular supplies, awards, things like that. That doesn't mean that they're buying trophies for everyone with these programs, but it's much like what we heard from the elementary schools and the upper elementary schools. They want to expand the services and the programs that they offer to the students, and this is really a nominal amount for them to accomplish. So let me let you in on what the teachers have done this year, even though it's not in their budget, and they've provided both via Zoom and in person to accommodate COVID this year and last year. And I happen to have this information, like I said, because I'm part of the parent-teacher group. They've instituted a yoga club, a chess club, a hiking club. So it encouraged students to get outside, but you could also join via FaceTime and Zoom because they didn't want you to miss it if you couldn't come and be with them, so you could take a walk in your own yard or something like that. They have a photography club, they have a quiz bowl. They also have a cooking club that's called the Whisk Club, and they do that spoons via Zoom. So if you cannot be in the building, they also offer that via Zoom. They have a dance club, and they've expanded their drama club a little bit so that they could do that via Zoom as well if needed. And then they still have the jazz band and the regular band and then the art club. But that's just a few of the things that they expanded on this year and last year to accommodate students and support them emotionally and physically and try to keep that social aspect in school. They are level funded with their equipment and maintenance, except for around kind of the copiers and some other office equipment. And there's a difference of about $716 that they're asking for the next year, and that's to do a few replacements and some maintenance. And then they do continue to buy furniture as needed, like the cafeteria tables and things like that, just a couple at a time so they can stay within the same budget annually. I think, is that pretty much it?
Yes, thank you, Ellen. I don't know if anyone else wants, Shane or Mackenzie, if there's anything you wanted to add as well.
Again, you know, this was my second one I did ever, and I say the same thing. I mean, all the questions I asked, you know, you're not looking for anything crazy here. You're just trying to expand the after-school program, a couple of small items, and, you know, I think it's amazing that you guys are doing all this with, first of all, no budget this year for it, and, you know, a small amount next year. So that's great. Thank you.
All right. So just to elaborate a little bit, so part of our hope with the $6,000 and as well as the $2,750 in the supply budget for our extracurriculars is to be able to create a little bit of consistency between the middle school opportunities and the high school opportunities. So things such as Science Olympiad, you know, the quiz bowl, hoping to have like some sort of yearbook opportunity for kids to be able to join like a committee similar to what they have at the high school, because there's just a great opportunity to be able to connect with people who have similar interests that will obviously lead to their continued exploration and continued abilities at the high school as well. As far as one of the questions that was asked at the budget hearing with the school board, and I just to reiterate that, which is of importance, is, you know, in previous years, so some of those clubs and activities that Ellen is referring to, they have been funded through what's called service learning projects, which is part of the MTA agreement, Merrimack Teachers Association agreement, and they have an opportunity to apply for a small stipend to be able to make it happen. However, the idea of something being there and being able to be consistent for our kids as they move from middle school to high school, to be able to have that opportunity to participate in things such as the Science Olympiad is the one that just pops into my head immediately. Is just would be really great for our kids and for their well-being. So great opportunities for kids to engage in their social emotional activity and interaction with peers on a regular basis. So I'd love to entertain any other questions that the committee might have.
Hi, I had a quick question.
Yeah.
First of all, I'd just like to say that it's amazing how creative and amazing the teachers are, and they really put the students' needs first, and I think it's absolutely amazing that you have all those clubs. I completely understand what you're saying about consistency through the middle school and up through high school. Are you planning, though, to keep some of the programs that you currently have for students, or will those kind of replace what you have now?
So I would imagine that some of the club activities would also still be occurring, but this is kind of, in my mind, the starting point to create that consistency.
So are the funds that you requested specifically for programs to be consistent, or will some go towards the current program?
So between the programs that I had mentioned and some intervention programs we'd like to offer, which are also some that we've been able to offer over the years to create that consistency. But there's also a component to understand that from year to year, the interests of students change. So we want to allow for some of that to potentially kind of happen naturally coming from the kids. So I would imagine there would still be some service learning projects or some other means of trying to offer unique activities for students that are of specific interest that year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Brian?
Do you by any chance have any data on differences in educational outcomes and or truancy for students who participate in the extracurriculars versus students who do not?
I don't have anything specific from the middle school. I mean, I can't tell you, I've read some things that do obviously draw that line, the importance of connecting with peers and having that sense of community obviously assists with that, those issues of truancy and wanting to attend school, especially at the middle school level, which can be really, really challenging for kids.
Do you know if it would be feasible? Does the data exist, or there's not really a good way to get that data?
It would definitely be something I'd have to look into. I don't know if I could answer specifically yet, but
Okay.
It's something we could explore.
The goal of the question is, it was brought up that there was some reluctance from at least some portion of the school board to fund these programs at the different levels. And if there is good data within our own district on what the difference on outcomes is, and that is actually a measurable difference in outcomes, I think that makes a very compelling argument for why we should not only fund the programs at the middle school to ensure consistency and be able to maintain those outcomes consistently year after year, but also to expand the positive outcomes across all levels. If it is at a very low cost to the district able to deliver a measurable difference in outcomes, then that really is a cost-effective way to ensure that Merrimack School District is meeting its mission statement.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Perhaps you could explain to the committee how competency assessment is handled at the middle school?
So at the middle school level, we have what I would consider to be more of like common assessments. They're not competencies. Competency is something that is true at the high school level. So for example, our 8th grade math teachers all work towards similar goals and have a similar, if not the same, assessment. We do like to provide students, opportunities to express their understanding in different ways. So for example, a social studies assessment may not necessarily be a pen and paper, but it may be an opportunity to create some sort of brochure that allows you to explain different components, excuse me, different components of what you've learned during that time, or there may be other means in which students are able to express that. But so basically at grade levels and in the different content areas, there are there are similarities and commonalities in the assessments.
Well, how do you groom them for self-efficacy to begin high school?
So, you know, a lot of that are things that we do through just the day-to-day. You know, providing them opportunities, helping them working on projects, helping them to be, you know, advocates for themselves, working on executive functioning skills to really help them, you know, understand how they're going to be able to, you know, be what they need to be in order to be successful. So, you know, when you think of you know, different opportunities that we have during the day. For example, we have a flex block. It may be something where students are able to ask to get some extra assistance, so beginning to understand and advocate for themselves, explore different content, different subjects. We have different activities that they can engage in during that time. So, you know, that's really trying to help them kind of understand who they are and become motivated and working towards, you know, their future, really.
So I can add something to that as a parent that's had 2 children go through Adam's school under his guidance and supervision. 5th grade is the first school where the entire district is together. 5th and 6th grade tends to be a little bit of turmoil as they all come together and they meld these personalities that they've had in their individual elementary schools. Then they step into middle school, and I called it the 3 A's when I was describing it to someone and trying to convert them over to our parent-teacher group. They have advocacy, so they teach the students to advocate for themselves. There's autonomy, so they learn that they're an individual within a group, but then there's accountability with that autonomy. So that's what I gathered from the teachers and watching my students go through it, and then just watching a few other students and being close to them, is they advocate for themselves, they learn how to be autonomous, and then they also learn how to be accountable so that they can be successful when they transition to the high school. And that group of guidance and leaders and teachers in that school, they love this awkward age, and there is not a hands down, I would say, they're the best at helping them convert and embrace their awkward, weird teenage personalities and transition to the young adults that they need to be in high school. And they care about them, and they'll follow, and they'll call the high school and advocate for them and help place them and talk to them. And it really kind of starts to let them discover more of who they are than in the lower grades as they come up and they're trying everything. And this is what their after-school programs are for and their enrichment programs are for, so they can experience everything, and then they start to dial it in and become masters of their own world by the time they get to that 7th and 8th grade. They take big trips, so they have responsibility. Their parents aren't there. They have to remember to brush their teeth, comb their hair, and eat their food, things like that. Does that make sense, Chuck? Did I help you?
Absolutely. Those are still things I'm trying to grapple with at my age.
I'd just like to say, as a member of the PTTF or Thorntons Ferry, can you come recruit for us? Because that's really great. But I also wanted to say that I think it's a big step in the right direction, too, having that consistency with the programs between middle school and high school. It's scary enough to go into high school, but if you have a common interest and you say, hey, I'm involved in this specific club, it's also going to be offered at the high school. So I have an opportunity to still see some of the friends that I had in, 8th grade, move up with them, but also meet other like-minded people who have the same interests. So I think that's another good step into getting them ready for high school, is that consistency. So again, I think it's a great idea.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the committee? Scott?
I'm not sure if this falls under this particular item, but I've heard from some members of the public that the baseball field at the middle school is not usable. Can you speak to that, or is that a different department that Matt's getting up? So
Matt is
I know where
getting
this
up.
is going.
It's a great dog park.
I'll let Matt take that one on.
Yes, that'll be coming up when Tom Tussaud comes in front of you. It's a maintenance item, but there's nothing really specific in the operating budget. A year or so ago, we tried a phase one where we had the baseball field is a 30-foot cut in the side of a hill, and there's a bunch of riprap, and there's a lot of glacial till under the field. There's a lot of unsuitable soils. And so there's a lot of water there. And we did a trench with a drain and perf pipe and everything like that that's taking a lot of water that would go onto the field from the hill off of the field before it can get there. However, there needs to be a stage 2 to this, because just after 1 year, it has done some good, but it hasn't met our expectations. So currently, right now, we're in conversation with Steve Keach, Nordstrom Engineering, who is trying to design us a phase 2. The issue mainly is school was built in a year. The field was done in the spring. The area that the field was put upon had a clay base to it. They tried to dig out as much unsuitable soil as possible without sinking a bulldozer into the spring clay that was saturated at the time. I know, I was there, I watched them. And so now it's still an issue. It's been an issue for a while. So we tried a couple of fixes over the years. We tried this last fix for around $80,000, which is still good, but we have to go a step further. And we need some more time to look at that field in order to figure out what that step is going to be. We've been offered one solution from Steve. We want to talk about a few more before we finally go full public with it right now. So it's under consideration. It needs further development. I know exactly what you're talking about, because when we were first building that school, I lost a shoe in that muck, and it's still there. And so 100 years from now, when they excavate it for something else, they'll find a Florsheim wingtip size 10, you know, so.
Is it black or brown?
It was actually Cordovan.
Oh, nice.
Thank you.
Style, Matt.
We'll make sure it goes to the Historical Society.
You know, that would be my dream, Mr. Moore.
Right next to my fedora. Any other questions? Scott, yes.
Is there anything in the budget, or is there anything not in the budget that you feel needs to be in there for student development or anything else that will benefit the students?
I would say no. We really tried to be thorough in that, and obviously, like the other schools, we try to be very wise with how we spend funds. So, okay. Thank you. I appreciate the question.
Thank you very much.
Yay, we survived, Adam.
And next we have the high school. Good evening, gentlemen.
My name is Steve Clare. I'm the interim principal. I've been here about 5 months. I'm coming to Merrimack again. I was in Merrimack from '01 to '09. I worked as a behavioral specialist at Reed's Ferry School. In the last 12 years, I've been an assistant principal at Milford High School. This is my first budget season, so this is a learning experience for me. I played more of a dean of students role in Milford, so I didn't have a lot of experience with the budget, so I've been leaning on these two wonderful gentlemen next to me to walk me through the process. This is Rich Zamperi, the assistant principal, and Peter Bergeron, the assistant principal. We met with Dan, Lee, and Scott on a Tuesday afternoon via Zoom, and I will defer to Dan to summarize our conversation. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, I will tell you that I think we put the fear of God into Steve. And I'm surprised he didn't wear armor to this meeting. So please don't throw anything at him. Ellen, I just want to point out to you that my background was in educational publishing, corporate. So I put huge budgets together that I had to defend. So this is more a CYA operation for me than anything else. And, you know, we go through line by line and make sure there's no thing. And with these gentlemen, there are no things. Our kids are in good hands with these three. And full disclosure, I have 2 grandchildren that go to the high school. Okay, so at our meeting, Steve Clare, Richard Zampieri, Peter Bergeron, myself, Scott Adler, and Lee French. The meeting opened with Steve Clare giving an overview of the budget, which was basically the overview of the budget statement, including the elimination of driver ed, English language arts purchases, English language arts renewal of the No Red Ink program, social studies text replacements, social studies actively learn program, and a science 6-year renewal of text software. The first question was about driver ed. Why? And is there no offering now? It was indicated that that's a Matt question. Put it down. But indeed, outside vendors are picking up the slack and students are becoming accommodated. There was a discussion of the effects of COVID on the budget, with voids in last year's budgets now being budgeted as students return to class, and its effects showed across the budget. There was a question on the 504 coordinator, and an explanation of the position was provided. There was a question on the high cost of police in the purchased property surfaces. It was pointed out that they are sometimes needed also at away games, for example at Westside Arena, and sometimes at local sporting events. There were questions on the music instructional repairs line, which was partially explained by COVID and non-use of the services last year. A question on 3-year averaging was indicated as a Matt question, though Scott Adler came to your defense and pointed out that in the postage main office budget item, that the increase may be due to increased postage costs. I always said he was smarter than me. It was suggested that we eliminate the notation 3-year averaging of expenditures, or keep making notes for you to take down. Okay, there was a discussion of the purchase property service as to whether Merrimack could be a provider and receive income instead of outputting for the services. It was pointed out that a special designation was needed, which is no longer available, and that the capital outlay would include new buildings and other things. Purchase property services led to an extended discussion of the difference in trip costs and the number of trips needed. Skiing had the highest number of trips, while spring track had the highest per trip cost. It was explained that the charges included the number of buses needed, the distance, and wait time. There was a question on why we moved ESOL to the World Languages supply line. It was indicated that that's where it aligns in the curriculum today. With the purchase of new text, it was emphasized that negotiations were needed and that teaching materials should be gratis. With the physical software budget item, that it was a new purchase and not a renewal. It was noted that there was nothing needed in the World Language additional equipment and the Phys Ed Health additional equipment budget lines. There was a question whether the 200 budgeted for 2,000 budgeted for real care baby simulators would be enough. The answer was yes, and I think we all said, my God, you've done a wonderful job in getting it there. There was discussion on the $3,000 budgeted for guitar purchases, which was a new program, and why there was no budget in the past. And it was because it's a new program. It was suggested that perhaps we should budget yearly and constantly update as needed. A question on the athletics ad equipment budget line, which was previously paid by gate sales. It was indicated and anticipated that gate sales in the future would offset some of these costs. We noted that this budget covered needs. What are the wants? It was indicated there's currently one full-time nurse and one floater, and if possible, they'd like to have 2 full-time nurses. Scott Adler followed up asking, if the full-time nurse calls in sick and the floater's elsewhere, what happens? It was answered that the subs, the district has a list of nurses they can call on those occasions. There was also a request to streamline the curriculum. It was indicated that the high school ranks middle of the road on 4 different state rankings, with many nearby high schools ranking higher. Sauhegan, Milford, both Nashua High School, Goffstown, and Campbell's in Litchfield. It was pointed out that the criteria for these rankings were questionable at best, like subjective, unverifiable postings, diversity. It was also pointed out that with some personal experience in the schools noted that ranked higher, they'd have to question the validity of the rankings to begin with. There was a question on reading, math, and science scores relative to the rest of the state. It was indicated that the new curriculum coordinator would address that. So welcome. A question on safety yielded the same response as JMU's. It's a district-wide issue. Steve is also on that committee, and they meet regularly. When asked, what have we missed? This group indicated that they thought they had budgeted for what they needed. When asked, what did you anticipate that we would ask that we did not ask, there was silence. I can tell you our students are in great hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan, for that summary. I'd just like to add, in regards to the Actively Learn that the English language department utilizes and began last year. That's a pretty hefty expense each year. It's about $24,000. So I did have our department head, our English department head, run a little data just to see how often that's being used. And since September 9th of this year, the first day of school, until January 3rd, 2022, a couple weeks ago, there was over 1,000 active student users, over 4,000 active student hours, learning hours, and well over 31,000 reading questions assigned, evaluated, and discussed. So that is something that we're very pleased we got passed again. In addition to that, the social studies was able to get a discount on that program, so they are also going to start it this year. So we're really pleased to get that passed. So that's really all I had to add. You guys have any?
Lee or Scott?
Well said. It was an absolute pleasure meeting with the 3 of you. I think that the budget is very thorough, and I appreciate you answering the questions that we all had.
Thank you.
Questions from the committee? Brian?
So similar to the question I asked in middle school, and doesn't really relate to your budget, but would any of you happen to have or be able to get data on differences in academic outcomes and truancy for students who participate in extracurricular activities as opposed to students who do not?
Well, typically the students that are engaged in extracurricular activities are not our truant students. I do know through my 12 years of experience as assistant principal that truancy and success in school go hand in hand. So unfortunately the truancy issue has been put on hold somewhat for the last 2 years due to COVID, but it is on our to-do list, so to speak, to take a closer look at our attendance policies this summer. But with that said, we do have 27 extra co-curricular activities with a lot of students involved, but those students aren't typically our truancy students.
And that intuitively makes sense. Do you know if you would be able to put together hard data on that at all? Or is that not really the kind of data that would be accessible?
Could you clarify the data?
Any type of analysis of correlations between academic outcomes, correlations between attendance and participation, to help in the evaluation of expanding co-curricular activities
Sure.
and extracurricular activities at the more junior levels of the schools.
Yeah, I certainly could take your question and bring it to our building leadership team and take a look at it for sure.
Great, thank you.
There has to be some similar school that doesn't offer as many co-curricular activities that also could give you attendance information and stuff, so they comparatively had it.
Any other questions from the committee? Yes, Gillian.
Sorry, I just embraced technology here and did a quick Google search for how does extracurricular participation affect student truancy rates, and there are actually multiple studies, some through the U.S. government, some, again, I just did a quick Google search, so I can't verify, but there's multiple studies from the mid-90s all the way through 2015 that look at the impacts on academic and student performance and participation. They all seem to correlate positively towards academic, co-curricular participation decreases truancy rates. So that's what all of this quickly sort of accumulates to.
Scott?
Thank you.
So based upon what Jillian just found, is that, Brian, do you think that that's satisfactory, or should the team go back and get more information?
So, I mean, candidly to me, it's kind of a no-brainer. If you provide better support, you get more engaged students. More engaged students, one, show up, and two, learn more. They have to show up before they can learn more. So it seems pretty obvious, but I wasn't at the school board meeting to hear what the objection and the question was, but my goal in the line of questioning is it feasible? And that's really what I'm trying to get is it feasible? If the answer is that data is not really there, but if we have it in spreadsheets inside of our district, I understand at the national level, I'm saying in Merrimack schools, can we show in Merrimack schools at the middle school and high school level, students who participate in co-curricular activities, their average GPA is 0.2 of a point higher, hypothetically. That begins to give some fuel for saying, okay, here's the potential ROI of an investment of, $50,000 across the elementary, upper elementary and middle school, $50,000 or $60,000 in a, $80 million budget. So if we have that data, then that really, I feel like within the district, not broader nationally, globally, but within Merrimack, if we can say, here's the correlation between participation in co-curriculars and academic outcomes as measured by GPA or standardized test scores, that begins to really make a better case, assuming that the data supports that.
Brian, I think I might have a solution to that. I think that we could take, PowerSchool is an amazing thing, and we could take a look at the list of our students that are involved in co-curricular activities, take a look at their attendance reports, run a comparison between their attendance report, their truancy reports, and their overall success at school, and give you that information.
Awesome, thank you.
I would second that, Brian. I think that's important information for us to consider.
I wanted to add something.
Any other questions?
I just wanted to add something, and I think everybody sitting here would agree that not only co-curricular activities, but anyone involved in a music program, obviously, you could look at their test scores and truancy, and also athletics as well. And I'm sure if we work with Jason and other people we have in the district, and as Steve just mentioned, PowerSchool is a very powerful tool that, we could come up with that data, which is great data to have, to show families, it's the importance of being involved in an activity and you know, it's just a small slice of your life, but a very important time to make sure you try to grab onto an activity that's going to make you a, you know, a better human being, and so on and so forth.
Well, that information is also important because talking to the choir is one thing, but we always have people that we need to inform and persuade with information to get their support. Carol, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I may have missed it because the audio isn't that great, but I don't think I heard any explanation of the rationale behind doing away with driver's ed.
I believe Matt's going to come up and take that question.
Hey, Steve.
Hey.
How you doing?
Hanging in there.
Good. Yes. I'm older than you, so I need to sit down. The driver ed program was done by, let's see, A1, yeah, A1 Auto School for decades, right? During the COVID period, driver ed was shut down because they just wouldn't allow people sitting this close to one another with or without masks to be in the same vehicle. So driver ed was shut down. During that course, A1 essentially went out of business. There are driver ed programs that kids in the high school are pointed to that serve Merrimack, and they can go directly there. The only reason why we ever had driver ed in our operating budget is because we used to collect the checks for the driver ed program. We used to fill out a report to the state, and we would get $150 per kid reimbursement from the state of New Hampshire for driver ed. Thus, we would use that to reduce the cost for kids taking driver ed, because at that time, the state of New Hampshire and the Department of Safety thought driver ed was a valuable service to be providing to students. Since then, maybe 7, 8 years ago, I think, the $150 reimbursement that came from the state to us that we would pass on to reduce the cost to families to provide driver ed for their sons or daughters was taken away. So it's one of those things that the state used to provide to us for every single kid because they thought it was important, and then they got down to a point where they had to balance their budget. So in addition to getting rid of building aid at 30% and a number of other programs, they also got rid of the subsidy for driver ed. So the reason why we were running it through our books in the first place is we were getting revenue from the state and we were passing that on to the students. So basically that's why it was there. And why it went away essentially is
at
because...
At this point, there would be no benefit to us doing it as opposed to the students each going out and getting it on their own.
There's no benefit to running our own program, and we went out to bid several times over the years, and we got no one who wanted to sign up to be the sole source for Merrimack. So it's easier for them, each child, to go out and make their own accommodations, and the driver ed programs around here in the area are very accommodating to students, I've found out. I don't know if you guys have any other anecdotal information, but that's the reason why it was just deleted from the budget.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Because there's a corresponding revenue on the other side that would drop with driver ed, so it had no effect to the tax rate anyway. So it's a reduction in the appropriation, but it's also a reduction in the revenue side too.
Right. Okay.
Dan. I can give you some anecdotal evidence as my granddaughter just got her license about a month ago. It was seamless. I mean, I'm going to have to move out of state now, but other than that, you know, it all worked fine.
Scott. I just want to add in that I questioned this pretty significantly as well because I was I was surprised to see this. The one thing that did bring me a little bit of comfort is knowing that the school still participates with the driver ed companies to make sure that the students can still take their driving while during class times, etc. So with the exception of probably a additional cost to the student for driver's ed, it is fairly seamless is what it seems to me for the student to be able to take the driver's ed. It's unfortunate that this happened because I know that A1 was always booked up for many, many, many months. And hopefully we can get some more providers within Merrimack, but the school is helping the students by allowing them to participate.
Yes, Gina.
I just had an overall comment. I completely agree with Brian that we should have some sort of measurable outcome. And I think in high school, it's easier to correlate co-curricular activities with academic progress and things like that. But I think for some of the other schools, it's hard to kind of quantify what co-curricular does because, for example, my child, I have 3 little girls that are in Thornton's Ferry. One of them is in an IEP. She thoroughly enjoys co-curricular activities, but it's not going to make her academics go up. So it's hard to measure the amount of social benefit that you get. So I'm not disagreeing with you at all. It's just hard to find something that can't really be consistent because of the different age groups. So just a thought of, what we would do as a measurable outcome for some of the younger grades.
I think a short-term 1-year goal would probably not be as overarching as a change in standardized test scores. Like that would be unrealistic and actually wouldn't inspire confidence if they brought that forward as a 1-year goal. But if the 1-year goal is to have X number of students per school enroll in the program and attend minimum 2 times per week, that would be a specific and measurable goal that would say, here is how the money will be used to drive some type of progress forward, so that any doubts from the school board about whether this is a sound investment are answered. If the concern is there's not a detailed plan, there's not a detailed plan because it needs to be driven by student interest, but here is the specific goal we're moving to. We're trying to get to this many students this many times per week would be, I feel like that's a immediate measurable goal that you can say, here's how we tracked against that goal.
Yes, I also was kind of questioning because none of them had a clear plan that they could articulate. But again, I know because, I actually run the programs at Thornton's Ferry right now as part of the PTTF. But, if you want to get student input, it's hard to do that ahead of time and be able to present because we can't do everything they want. I'm on the playground committee, they asked for a pool. That's not happening. Or they asked for like a 50-foot twirly slide, not happening either.
Come on.
I know, we're stingy. I don't know what to tell you. Yeah. Yeah. But yes, I think that would be a good parameter of success. I'm just all for co-curricular, especially after COVID, where everyone was so isolated. I think it's a great way to get out of the house and make new friends and, overall increase your social emotional well-being.
Yeah, that's a good point because I think a lot of people who maybe don't have children don't understand the aspect of especially our younger ones. So I have a 1st grader, so she had at least preschool, pre-K, but there's a whole group of students coming in who haven't seen people's faces, didn't get to play with each other on the playground. They didn't get that social emotional interaction. And I even watched them in dance classes walk in and touch people like, wow, you have a face and you have, because they had a couple of years where they only looked at people on a screen when they're told no screen time, but now that's the only way you can learn. So I know you need that sledgehammer like Brian's trying to give so that it's undeniable, but there's got to be a little bit of give there, and it's really not that big of an amount in an overall budget.
Yes, Scott.
Logistical question, and probably should have thought of this before everybody left, so if anybody can answer it. With the co-curriculars that occur after school, yes, is there a light bus or anything that takes theirs? Okay, perfect, thanks.
I would appreciate it if you could inform the committee how competency assessment is implemented at the high school.
Pre-COVID, we had a hybrid report card that had both the traditional ABC grades as well as the competency score. In the course of the adjusting to COVID, we eliminated the competency scoring and went to essential learning components because we also reduced the number of hours, not hours, but we met the minimum hours, but number of days while we were here that first spring. And so we also continued that work this year. The high school was in the process of revising and reviewing the competencies for each content area. Pre-COVID, and that work has been put aside because, again, of proximity and committee work and things of that nature, and we hope to restart that process of looking at the rubrics that we have of assessing the competencies for each class. So we don't have a competency score at this time, but we hope to get back to that model down the road. But first we need a more authentic assessment and rubric to be able to assess a student achieving where they achieve on those competencies.
How far down the road?
As soon as, well, we're in the process of making that part of the new curriculum work that is happening from this point forward, and Mrs. Yarlett can talk about that from a district perspective of what we're doing to make curriculum work uniform throughout the district K to 12. In those efforts, we are currently using, health is currently in revision right now. Social studies has restarted their curriculum work. And is there another department? Phys Ed just finished, they're doing the health though, right, in that sense. So in future curriculum work, we'll have that embedded.
So is competency assessment a policy of the school district? Unfortunately, we don't have a school board member here tonight to answer that, but I expect you all would know what was policy.
You know, I've only been here a few months, but my understanding through my conversations with our building leadership team is in 2019 and 20 pre-COVID, they were heading towards the competency-based assessments and direction, and then it was put on pause because of COVID, and we've had discussions about re-engaging that with Mrs. Yarlard, our assistant superintendent of curriculum. So I don't know the timeline, but I know that it has been in our building leadership discussions.
I think it needs a great deal of discussion. It also needs a great deal of training. Needs a great deal of professional development. I haven't seen anything in the budget proposed from you for that kind of training so that our staff would understand what competency assessment really is and abandon some of the stuttering that has taken place to date in implementing it and getting on board with something that is universally practiced with an outcome that's measurable. Does that sound like a criticism? I'm simply looking to fund something here.
Well, you know, that's certainly a further discussion I can have with the SAU at the SAU level.
I think that would be a discussion you probably should be having with the entire leadership. I mean, I can't possibly be the only one advocating for moving forward with competency assessment. Obviously, we saw the value of it some years ago and made an insufficient attempt at implementing it, and now we are years again later, still struggling with not embracing the best management practices of education as it's delivered in New Hampshire today, and perhaps many other states. So I guess, yes, I don't know that I would necessarily hold all of you accountable, but I think that the school board needs to seriously consider acting on this, as it has been lagging for some period of years. There's nothing more important than the outcome of our students' education being measurable in an honest and fair way that gives them the largest advantage in applying for further education and other opportunities. We are not serving our school district and our students if we simply think we should have indifference to competency assessment, in my opinion. I'm also a little concerned that there have been some reports of an inequity in funding various sports programs that may have some inequity relative to gender. And I would hope you would take a close look at that and assure us all that if the boys' basketball team gets caps along with everything else, that, you know, the girls' field hockey team gets caps along with everything else. I can sure you appreciate that. And I know how easily those things can somehow or another not quite come up to par in a school district as large as this, with a budget as large as this. But I am here to help support your making this equitable for all of our students in all of our programs. We have in the past, as some people have indicated, I think Shane was one of them, and earlier we talked about fundraising for various things that is really the school district's responsibility. I want to make sure that when we pass a budget, it meets the bar for every student equitably across the board. I don't want to see cheerleaders out doing a car wash to raise money to go to a cheerleading competition. That's again not an equitable support of our students. When we have no problem busing a baseball team anywhere and paying for it. These things largely go unsaid. And I'm speaking for a number of people here this evening, I believe, that want to reinforce the need for that equitable funding. So if you need money in your budget to make sure there is equity in the way we treat our students and their programs, now is the time to tell us.
Well, there's a little bit of a difference between busing kids to Dover for a playoff game and going to Florida for a championship cheer competition. So I think that they do things equitably, but then there's also different expenses, like renting a gymnasium and taking care of the boys' basketball team is different than the fields required for the girls' field hockey team. I don't, as a parent in the district, I haven't really noticed a huge inequity because there are different fundings, like hockey's much more expensive than baseball. Swimming is different, but the girls and boys are treated the same. I'm not off base there, but there is a difference between, making them fundraise for a national competition versus a state competition. I don't think the district should be held responsible for something outside of our state.
They are our students. We are responsible for that student when he goes out of state and participates in anything. And we administratively follow them to those events. We are parenti in loci. And we have a responsibility to fund those initiatives. If there are going to be programs in the school, they need to be funded by the district, regardless of where they go. That's just the long and the short of the fairness of education law.
I just want to make a statement that I don't know of any inequities of any of our sports here at the high school, and I've been here in the district since 2001. We fund all of our teams equally. For example, if you look out on a field on a spring day and you see a softball team playing, the girls don't wear caps. They don't. That's what they do in softball. The boys do. Sometimes it comes down to sheer numbers too. If we had, X amount of girls, we would add a team. We've done that before. As far as like a national competition, our athletic teams don't compete in national competitions. They compete in state competitions. That's what we do. We have co-curricular teams, for example, like US First or Science Olympiad, that will travel far. The school board has blessed us with the budget, transportation budget, instead of taking care of those expenses. But I honestly don't know of any inequity in any sports. We have a reconditioning budget, and we send out girls softball helmets, uniforms, and things of that nature. Obviously, when you send a helmet out, there's a cost to that to get reconditioned and things of that nature. But we do our very best each and every year to meet all of our students' needs, both male and female.
I appreciate that position. But one individual, has been around a while, I've said it publicly at school board meetings, and I will say it again tonight. I am tired of the school district turning children into beggars in the community. That's what they do. They beg for money because they need things. Am I here to defend and itemize what all those things are? No, I am not. But I do know that our children are beggars for fundraising. And I want the school district to ensure to the people of Merrimack that everything they are responsible for in terms of taking care of school programs and so forth is funded by the community. That's the long and the short of it, and I'm not afraid to tell you that. Brian.
So I just wanted to highlight, it's a surface level analysis, but where there are comparable line items in the budget for a boys and girls team of the same sport, it's the same dollar value in both of those line items. So again, it's a surface level analysis, but that very top level analysis does show a deliberate focus on providing equity for all students that are participating.
Well, conflict is always measured by inequity. This is the only reason for conflict. And we do, as you all well know, occasionally have conflict amongst different groups for different reasons. And it usually lies in insufficient or inequitable economics of the situation. Enough said.
Well, I just want to touch on the begging for money portion. Is now that I'm more involved with some of the sports at the high school level, they have what they need for the competitions and stuff, and they have their equipment. They show up with new masks. They have jerseys. They have things. What they fundraise for are the extras, like the extra food on the bus. So is that something that you think the school district should supply, is for the football teams and the basketball teams and the hockey teams, their pizzas that they have on the way home from their away game, because they provide them the transportation, the practice, the coaches. They provide them the time and the money that they need for that, but it's those little things. They even have bottled water. You know, they have things that they need, but those are extras that I see them fundraising for, or the varsity letter jackets that they like to buy each other.
I would hard to believe that it was an extra if the trip was long enough that it required snacks and eating, that the school district couldn't provide a box lunch for all of the participants while they were being transported.
Well, they have snacks to go to Conway Arena that's 20-minute drive away because that's what they want. So sometimes it's the parents and the athletes that want it, and it's not necessarily a necessity.
Well, I don't want to get dragged into the weeds of what-ifism and so forth, but I think I have clearly articulated my concern about equity and ensuring that the school district understands that there are differing points of view about what should and shouldn't be funded, and they need to be exceptionally sensitive and sensible to that. Lee, did you have a question?
I did. We got a little off topic on the assessment for the high school students. Excuse my ignorance, but what is the state requirement for assessing our high school students?
The only standardized test at the high school level is the SAT.
Thank you.
Peter, do you want to add something regarding the athletics situation, the co-curricular?
Yeah, just real quick. Our neighbors to the south, Massachusetts, they were the first state in the nation to implement what they call user fees, and we don't have those. For example, if you were a hockey player in Massachusetts, you may have to pay, X amount of dollars to play on the ice hockey team. So, once again, we're blessed here in Merrimack and state of New Hampshire, where I'm sure there are some communities in New Hampshire that do require kids of that, but, that obviously wouldn't be fair. So we do adequately cover all the expenses for our athletic teams. We do have booster clubs, and like Ellen pointed out, those are for the extras. Some booster clubs raise more than other booster clubs for teams. But if there was a team that was lacking, we would certainly find a way to help those students out.
Chuck?
Yes, Carol.
I'm also wondering if a fair analogy on all this would be when, I've forgotten what grade level it is, but they do the trip to Washington, D.C. or something like that. The parents have to pick up part of the cost of that because that is something over and above what the baseline education is. So is some of this fundraising for the sports teams something similar where the school district provides the basics, but the parents or the kids through the fundraising efforts or whatever are picking up additional costs?
I actually know a lot about the DC trip because it's in 8th grade and I've worked with it. I've been a chaperone on it. The PTG supports them and pays for their transportation for that trip, and then the students are responsible for the amount of the trip. And it has gone up just a little bit over the years, but they fundraise directly. And then those students who are unable to attend, that's what those student activity lines and enrichment lines and enhancement lines and even the parent-teacher group supports with scholarships for that. And then they've been lucky enough for the DC trip specifically that each and every year there's at least one parent who offers 1 to 5 scholarships to cover that for students. So those are above and beyond extras, Carol, and that's kind of like what I was making a point about. As a parent, I don't feel that my athletes or even my mathlete who's on the math team is missing anything, and I feel that there's equitable support there, but it's the extras that the parents and the students decide to raise the money for on their own.
Okay.
Lee? Scott, yes.
Chuck, when I hear things like inequity, and it's particularly gender inequity or inequality that you're referencing, it concerns me because I don't think that there should be any of that whatsoever. And I listened to Mr. Bergeron say that he is unaware of any, and I'm curious if you have any specific examples of this that could be looked into further.
Well, let me just say that there's no gambling in the casino either. Casablanca. Any other questions?
I just had one
Yes,
question.
Shane.
I'm new to this. I have no opinion on inequity. I did go to school here. I didn't experience that, but it certainly could have changed. I don't know. I'm looking down this list of sports. The only thing I can do is compare male and female. The difference, I only see one difference. Lacrosse, male. Lacrosse, female. Each trip for the male is $425. Each trip for the female is $300. Is that distance? Is that they go to a different place, or is that really an inequity?
It could be distance and number of participants. You know, lacrosse team, the boys, because of sheer numbers, you know, they will need an extra bus. You know, there could be a year or a couple of years down the road where all of a sudden the numbers for girls lacrosse, you know, increase, and we're going to have you know, an extra bus. Gotcha. For the girls lacrosse team.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, I would like to explore a money-saving opportunity. I realize this is the Budget Committee and not the school board. But nevertheless, we're all taxpayers here, and we are charged specifically with coming up with the best budget that we can. It's my understanding that our schedule at the high school could be altered in such a way as to have department heads teach a class that they are not presently teaching. And I would see that as an economy that we could realize. And I have no idea why it hasn't been taken up by the school district. Perhaps you could tell me.
I can't answer that question this evening. I do know that, you know, if I'm here for longer than the year, that I do want to put together a schedule committee and take a look at our school schedule. But I was not aware of that information that you just shared. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, department heads presently do not have to teach 2 periods. And they have a planning period. And that could be their duty. Why can't they teach an additional class, as all of our other teachers are required to teach 5?
Yeah,
I'll be honest with you, I wanted to ask the school board this question. The school board doesn't answer any questions. So now I have a microphone, I can ask the question and hope that somebody who works in the school district can shed some illumination on that.
Well, in my brief time here, my understanding is that department heads have 2 classes. They supervise a study hall, they have a duty, and they have other responsibilities. They oversee the the whole department, so they have a number of evaluations they need to do during their off time. They do all the PD development with their staff members, and they typically have between, anywhere between 10 and 12 staff members that they oversee. So that extra time is used for PD development, evaluations, making sure their certifications are all up to date. That's my understanding, my brief time here.
Well, I think that bears some looking into, particularly since we have such a problem with teacher shortages, substitutes, and so forth. It seems to me that within the scope of the contract, we could ask them to teach an additional class by simply changing the schedule.
Thank you for sharing that.
Anybody else have any comments?
I just want to make you feel better that I know for a fact one department head is currently teaching one of my high school students, because they do have a shortage of teachers and they have stepped up. And he even sends emails and says, I'm the department head, I've taken on a couple extra classes, please bear with me if I am a little lacking in communication, but he's there teaching.
It's not a question of my feeling better. It's a question of my responsibility to advocate for the most efficient use of the funds that we ask the people of the Merrimack to support our school district with. If we can rearrange our teaching schedules and make better use of our time and our present employees, I think it's incumbent upon us to do that. It's not a personal agenda on my part.
I understand and I respect that. It wasn't a personal attack. It was just the comment about shortages right now, and I wanted people to know who may be listening that the department heads are stepping up.
Are the department heads stepping up? Teaching additional classes?
As Ellen said, they are stepping up. They're also helping when we have a substitute shortage. I had a conversation with our, our attendance secretary, and she couldn't speak more highly of how often they're checking in with her to see if her substitute needs are being met.
How many department heads do we have?
6.
How many of them are stepping up?
All of them.
So this was all for naught if they're doing that anyway, is that correct?
Well, it's always good to take a look at schedules year by year to see if they're most efficient, but considering the pandemic we're in right now, we have to prioritize our needs, and right now our needs are trying to get as many teachers with certifications in our classroom to be working with our students.
It's a tough job, isn't it?
It got tougher after tonight.
I tried to warn you. Are there any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, I'd certainly like to thank you very much for coming before us and trying to shed some light on the things that we would like to know and need in the consideration of our deliberations here. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Do we have any members of the public left for public participation?
They're all disguised as blue chairs.
Seeing none, we will close public participation. Member comments?
Motion to adjourn.
No member comments?
I've probably reached my limit, so I'll second Brian's motion.
Can I have a motion to adjourn? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear that. Fair enough. We are adjourned. Good night, Carol.